we are going to hear Sri and Ravi, the chairperson of Kasturi and Sons Limited, the reputed, the press in the country, the publisher of the Hindu and other publications of a Hindu group. He is former editor-in-chief of a Hindu and has been in journalism since 1972. And since Hindu is part of our life, and I remember that the day I started to read newspaper, I started with the Hindu, and our thinkings, our thoughts, everything is shaped by, our lives is shaped by such a great quality newspaper that they bring out. Mr. Ravi holds a master's degree in economics and a degree in law. I'm very happy to have you here, sir. I'm coming from law faculty, Delhi University, and having you here with a law background and economics background, it really gives me immense pleasure. And he was also a fellow at Harvard Law School in 2000. And he was also Shorenstein's fellow at Kennedy School of Government in Harvard University in 2004. And Mr. Ravi has been on the lead in shaping and improving the quality of the national newspaper, the Hindu. And he joined the newspaper Hindu in 1972. He served as a reporter, lead writer, Washington correspondent, deputy editor, associate editor, all kinds of positions. And his contribution is immense to the newspaper. He was the editor from 1991 to 2011 and chief editor-in-chief from 2013 to 15. He covered several international conferences and traveled with prime ministers and presidents to cover international summits. And his special interests are in writing, including on constitutional and political issues, economic policy, international economy, free speech, human rights, and India-US relationship. He is the recipient of several professional awards, including G.K. Reddy Memorial Award, Bread Role Model Award, and was awarded an honorary doctorate by Sri Venkateswara University, Tirupati. We are very fortunate to have you here amidst us, sir. We request you to kindly share your views on celebrating democracy today. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you, Dr. Pushpakumar.
Yes.
I'm indeed honored to be speaking in this memorial event to celebrate the contribution of one of India's outstanding political leaders and parliamentarians, Sri Jaipal Reddy, and that too in the company of Sri Qureshi, who is the custodian of democratic values in India, both in and out of office, Sri Dilip Reddy, Dr. Pushpakumar, Mrs. Jaipal Reddy, family, friends, and admirers of Sri Jaipal Reddy. In fact, talking of Mrs. Jaipal Reddy, I cannot resist reading out this dedication in the book to her by Sri Jaipal Reddy. And I quote, "To my wife Lakshmi, who has contributed to my career through her drudgery for over half a century without laying claim to my time or fame." Actually, this is typical Jaipal Reddy. A sentiment, unusual sentiment expressed with great love and sensitivity. I had met Sri Jaipal Reddy on a few occasions and, true to his reputation, found him to be deeply reflective and sensitive with a ready wit and extreme courtesy. Much of my acquaintance with him, though, had been through reports of his speeches and announcements and from accounts of other political leaders, all of whom had nothing but praise and admiration for him. And of course, from reading the book 10 Ideologies, that opened my eyes to many new approaches and insights. This is an extraordinary book, written with a breadth of understanding and vision and clarity of thought that few in public life could summon. It draws upon his deep, lifelong learning and experience as a parliamentarian and holder of public office, never swerving from the principles that he held dear. Among the qualities that stand out in his long public life are absolute integrity that came out most dramatically in his handling of the petroleum ministry, which he gave up rather than compromise with his values, his uncompromising love for liberty and democratic values and opposition to arbitrary power, his passion for philosophical and political ideas and concepts, his advocacy of modern education, and of course, as Mr. Dilip Reddy said earlier, his tolerance and secular outlook. It is fitting that celebrating democracy should have been chosen as the theme for this memorial event. In his book, Sri Jaipal Reddy notes that while several independent nations lapsed into autocracy and dictatorship, Indian democracy remains strong. He finds explanations for Indian democracy surviving in terms of the enlightened aspect of British colonialism or the syncretic, all-encompassing nature of Hindu religion inadequate. Interestingly, he picks on Gandhian non-violence, toleration and compassion as the most convincing reason for India remaining a democracy. Non-violence and democracy are closely tied, and we have noted that violence could be very disruptive of the democratic process, as seen very recently in the aftermath of the US elections, when the capital was stormed by a riotous mob. Democracy brings within its fold many aspects, all of which seem equally important. The choice of public office holders, the rights and liberties the people enjoy, the instruments of the state that protect the people and the rights and the attitude of people and public office holders on the democratic spirit. From ancient times, democracy has been seen as a rule by the people as a whole or by representatives chosen by the people. As Abraham Lincoln famously put it, it is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. Though Mr. Dilip Reddy had modified the terms to suit the current context. Free and fair elections by which people choose their representatives is thus an essential element of democracy. In India, we have been fortunate in having a well-designed and refined electoral system thanks to the efforts and foresight of men like Sri Qureshi and successive chief election commissioners. As a result, not only have successive elections been conducted smoothly, India is even able to offer assistance to other nations on the mode and logistics of conducting elections. All is not perfect though, and the influence of money power still remains a corrupting influence. While the blatant use and show of money power has been curbed, the surreptitious use of money, including outright bribing of voters, remains rampant in some parts of the country. The search for remedies continues, but suggestions such as state funding of elections have remained non-starters, largely because of the lack of public funds and the want of an acceptable formula for distributing such funding among the parties, which are too numerous both nationally and in the states. Electoral democracy, while important, is not all. The content of a democratic society in terms of dignity, liberty, equality, and justice would be equally important. By and large, there is a large measure of democratic freedoms available, though there are some deeply problematic areas. The enumeration of freedoms in the chapter on fundamental rights in the Constitution is well known. The Supreme Court has, through its judgment, expanded the scope of the fundamental rights to take in new rights. Thus, the right to life of dignity beyond bare existence, the right to education, and the right to privacy have been added to the list through judicial pronouncements, reading all these into the constitutional right to life as spelled out in the Constitution. Among the democratic freedoms, the rights that have come under strain in the recent period have been the right to personal liberty and the freedom of expression. The use of the sedition law in the Indian Penal Code has seen a curtailment of both freedom of speech and of personal liberty. Not just the states, but even the center has reached out to the sedition law to curb dissenting voices, despite the Supreme Court ruling that unless there's open advocacy of violence, critical speech would not amount to sedition. The criminal defamation law, as well as the power of courts to punish for contempt, have also acted to shrink the space for free speech. The most recent case of Prashant Bhushan illustrates the reach of this restriction. Even cartoonists and comedians have been arraigned for contempt of court by some people and taken up by an oversensitive judiciary. The courts have been the guardians of people's rights from the encroachment of people's rights from the executive and legislative overreach. Here, the record of the judicial institution has been patchy. For instance, the Supreme Court has been inordinately tardy in taking up cases relating to the detention in Kashmir or lockdown in the state. While the court has pronounced that the right to personal liberty is most valuable, bail applications have been routinely delayed. While the executive and the legislature can be expected to push the boundaries of their authority, the judiciary as an institution seems to have slipped somewhat from its protective role. Coming finally to that difficult to define democratic spirit, it is clear that laws and institutions are only as good as the people who work them. And for the proper working of the democratic system, a spirit of mutual respect, toleration, and playing by the rules of the game, both written and unwritten, would be necessary. Instances such as the Citizenship Amendment Act and the sudden proliferation of anti-love jihad laws has strained the secular and tolerant democratic spirit. Here, I could do no better than quote Sri Jaipal Reddy, and I quote, "A majoritarian hubris or minoritarian nemesis can spell danger even now to Indian democracy, as either could jeopardize the consensus of Gandhian nationalism." I would not want to exaggerate. Despite these aberrations, though, democracy remains strong, personal liberties are largely intact, and institutions are by and large responsive, though there's a great deal of room for improvement on all these fronts. And in the making of Indian democracy, we also celebrate the substantial contribution of Sri Jaipal Reddy by his exemplary and selfless service in public offices. I am indeed honored to be part of this celebration of democracy in memory of Sri Jaipal Reddy.
Thank you very much, sir, for these very enlightening words. Such a pleasure listening to you. You have very rightly connected the constitutional vision that we have in the country under Article 21 to deliver right to life and human dignity. Both could not be possible if we do not have strong democracy. You have very rightly linked. And you also stated that we get the kind of a government depending on the people. The people get what they deserve. So if we have to strengthen democracy, we have to strengthen people. It's the right message you have given. We will definitely work for it, and we will spread this message among the youth and the people. Thank you so much, sir, for your kind time and valuable points that you have shared with us.